Okay, welcome everybody. I apologize for the later start today. I had a 10 to 11 training that I was in, and sometimes when things butt right up against each other, it can be difficult to get from one place to the other. So it looks like just about, yep. So we're at, maybe we might be waiting for a few more. But for the most part, the waiting room has slowed down quite a bit. So I am going to wait maybe just one more minute for folks to come into the meeting, and then we will start talking about feedback. All right, folks, here we go. So I did want to just thank you all for sticking with the process of offering this 4-part series on MTSS. I know that it has been a lot of pieces to put together, and there's been a lot of confusion. There's been a lot of you know, needing clarity on certain things. And I know that it was probably incredibly difficult for all of you who are participating in multiple sessions to get used to the different presenters and the different ways that each of the presenters was offering their professional development. I know that some of the folks that have been offering professional development had very small numbers. They had, 35 or 40 people that were signing up. And then some of us had in the hundreds of numbers. I had I think 380 people initially sign up. And then I've been averaging somewhere between 125 and 160 that actually show up for the training. Today we're at 109. And so, how to navigate both of those things has definitely been something that was, I don't think initially anticipated when we were thinking about offering these things to the field for you. And so I really, really appreciate those of you that have stuck through all 4. I know there's been a lot of changes. I know that there's been a lot of confusion. And so I do want to just start off by just a little bit of housekeeping like we did last time. So the recordings for all 4 of the MTSS for EdTechs will be posted by the end of the week this week. It was a lot easier for me as my own presenter to have the recordings all done so that I can just set aside a day to do any editing and polishing and then set them all up at once. So the MTSS for Educational Technicians recordings will be up by the end of the day on Friday. So if you have colleagues that are looking for those, or you're looking to go back and review any of the sessions, by the end of the day, Friday, those will be available on the website. And the website that you'll go to get to those is actually the same website that you went to register. So it's at the Maine Department of Education website. You'll click on Teacher Resources, Professional Development for EdTechs, and then there's the table that offers all the different sessions. That's where you'll find the links to those recordings. I am also intending on sending out an email with the recordings in them, so that you can have it in your inbox as well, so that you don't have to go back and find them every time you want to look for them. And then you can download them to your machine if you want to, and access them. Now, I know some of you are also participating in the SEL for MTSS, or the SEL and MTSS training series as well. Same thing for that series. The SEL videos will be available at the end of the series. Now that series doesn't end until next week. So those recordings will be available next Friday, not this Friday, okay, for that. Housekeeping item number 2, certificates. Okay, so I have had lots of people request certificate for week 1 that was having a hard time getting it, certificate for week 2 that was having a hard time getting it, and just about everybody that participated in last week's or last Thursday's session 3 has requested their certificate. They've not been mailed out yet, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to collect them and then I'm going to send them all out collectively again, so I can chunk off some of my time and then send that certificate out to folks that have not received it yet. Some of you may have received it and others may have not. So, but the good news is having folks request a certificate through the Google form was so much easier, because your email and your name came right to a spreadsheet for me, and now I can just attach that certificate to you. So if you are still waiting on certificates for MTSS for EdTechs, I would ask that you give me through Friday to get all 4 of them sent out to you. And if by Monday you do not have a certificate for a particular session, send me an email and let me know, and I will make sure that you get that certificate. So by next week, you should have all 4 of your certificates if you've attended all 4 sessions, okay? So I'm collecting the names in a much more organized way now and can send those out in a much more organized fashion. But I appreciate your patience and your willingness to kind of let me fumble through this. I literally fumbled through this in front of all of you, trying to figure out how best to meet all the needs. And so I really appreciate your patience and your willingness to kind of let me learn through this, because I'll tell you, I learned so much and I appreciate that. So by next week, you should have certificates. For today's session, we're going to be talking a lot about feedback, because that was what was listed on the website in terms of providing feedback in an MTSS system. And so we're going to get to that shortly. But I will tell you that I will save the chat at the end of the session today so that I can go back and look at what came up in the chat. But I won't be monitoring the chat in the session. So in a couple of minutes, when we actually start engaging with the work, I will not be looking at the chat. So anything that's urgent, you're going to want to unmute yourself and ask it out loud, or save it, put it in the chat, and then I will get to it at a later time. Not having the chat available last Thursday was much better for the continuity of the discussion and the continuity of the presentation. And while I didn't disable the chat this time, I won't be monitoring it. So if you use it, just understand that I'm not looking at it, so I'm not sure what is happening in there. And I think that is it for the, I wanted to speak quickly about the SEL certificates, because that's going to be the same as the MTSS certificate. So if you are somebody that's participating in both the MTSS and the SEL/MTSS, we will be posting links on the website for requesting certificates. So we'll be doing it the same way. So if you are still struggling to get certificates for SEL, we will get caught up. Those links to request those certificates will become available as the system continues to move on. Okay, so that is all of the housekeeping. And so what I would like to do now is go ahead and start with where we've been and kind of where we're headed today. So where we've been so far in this series is we have talked about multi-tiered systems of support as an overview framework for providing support that is targeted and preventative in the school setting for our students, and the role, the super important role that an ed tech plays. Remember, I view you guys as you're the grease. If it weren't for the ed tech population in our schools, the systems can't work, because you guys are helping to facilitate and navigate the students through all of these different systems that exist. So somebody, you know, sitting in the main office, in the front office, comes up with all these great ideas and says, we're going to do this and we're going to do this and we're going to do this. Well, if it weren't for you guys, none of that would happen, right? Because who's going to be the ones that's helping to move kids through these systems and helping kids navigate through these systems? And so, as far as I'm concerned, school can't happen without you. And we talked about that by talking about how, you know, when it comes to providing support for our students, and we watched the bowling video, if you remember the bowling video from week 1, you guys are the ones that help the teachers and help the schools come in at that curve, right? Because at the end of the day, it's usually you guys that are looking at those 2 poor kids that are staring back at the teacher going, I still don't get it, I still don't understand. And so you guys are the ones that help to grease that bowling lane so that the balls can come in at the angle and help to achieve the, you know, the results that the MTSS is looking for. Then we had a somewhat truncated discussion about the problem-solving framework. And so we are going to try to circle back a little bit today, because the problem-solving framework is that piece that helps you navigate through the tiers. And so I did want to just review that super quick today. And then last week we talked about, I believe it was, I actually don't remember. Does anybody remember what we talked about last week on Thursday? That's funny. I can't remember if it was evidence-based practices or.
We talked about data.
Data, yes. Okay, data collection and oh yes, we talked about having it be easily accessible, relevant to the data points that you're trying to collect, so that you can use that data to drive your instruction. Okay, so data collection. I'm sorry, having one of those days where I sit in my chair for hours on end and not move. And so my meetings are getting a little bit muddled in my head. Okay, so just as a quick review, 5 primary components to Maine's MTSS framework: strong team leadership, evidence-based practices, data-based decision-making, levels of support for all students, and school and community engagement. Those are the 5 pillars that a high-quality MTSS framework will be built upon in a school setting. But today's conversation is about feedback. So taking a look at these 5 building blocks of Maine's MTSS, I want you to think for just a minute, and where does feedback fit into this particular framework? So just think, where does feedback fit into this particular framework?
Feedback is really important for support to students who have trouble with understanding first level 1 directions. You really have to get in there and look at their work and give them feedback on that so that they can revise to proficiency.
Great. So which of the building blocks does the feedback stand on?
Is it all of them?
Yeah.
All of them.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I think all of them.
So give me an example then, somebody, of where feedback or how feedback would be important at the leadership level.
Can I take this one? If the leaders don't have the information of what the student is doing from the ed techs, they can't then make their decisions. If there's a breakdown in communication, the whole thing collapses.
Yeah. Yep. What about evidence-based practices? Somebody want to offer where feedback fits into evidence-based practices?
If one practice isn't working for a particular student, then, you know, you have to know that and choose a different one. So you have to know all your evidence-based practices.
Not to mention that all students are so different.
And they're all going to approach an evidence-based practice in a different way, correct? Is that what
Absolutely.
you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. So just because something is touted as evidence-based and has strong evidence that this program is going to work for this kid, is that necessarily true if for a kid under a specific circumstance?
No.
No. And so we need the feedback of how that student responds to that practice in order to be able to understand whether to continue, well, we talked about this last week, to modify, continue, or discontinue a practice, correct?
Yes.
Great. And that database, or that data collection that we talked about last week, is super important in helping to make those decisions. Okay, so we've sort of answered evidence-based practices and data-based decision-making all in one. What about levels of supports for students? Where would feedback fit in to levels of supports for students?
Whether or not a student is getting too much support or not enough support, or if we need to change the type of support the student is getting.
And how would you analyze that feedback, or how would you collect it? What are some types of feedback that you could be looking for to gather that information?
I would say how they do in various settings, like if you're with them at recess and how they're doing in that setting, or how they're doing in specials, and taking notes and then informing the leadership team or your teacher, you know, whoever you communicate to.
I'd say using data-based information also would help show that there needs to be possible levels of support that need to be changed or added to a student's program also.
Great. And when you think of the students that you work with every day, you've got so one of the natural things that you're going to do as an ed tech is you're going to observe and take notes, right? Isn't that what, you know, that's a huge part of your day. In fact, I'm surprised that, well, I mean, I'm sure that when you first started your job, or when at the very beginning of the year, or when you're starting to work with somebody new, how many of you go home extra exhausted, right? Because all of your senses are on, because you're constantly taking in all of that environmental feedback, right? So that you can make decisions about getting to know your kid, about getting to know the environment, about getting to know how they function within that environment. So observation and note-taking are the really obvious ways. There's another way that your students are going to give you feedback that you can collect to help with your database decision making. And that's conversation, right? And actually talking to them and asking them. And even some of the most obscure conversations can offer interesting feedback to how a student feels or perceives a certain aspect or certain part of their day, right? What about school and community engagement? Where does feedback fit into that building block?
You would like the school and the community, whether it's the parents or if they have other outside services, to kind of work together and share information so they can do the best thing for the student.
Yeah. You're right. Is that Mary?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mary. That's good. Anybody else want to build on that or have anything to add to Mary's thought?
I don't know if this goes along with what Mary's saying, but I know for myself anyway, and maybe many other ed techs, this is Heidi, we as ed techs have not had that communication with family members like we're having right now. So this is a whole, you know, different ball game, so to speak, in having the communication going beyond, you know, the norm of speaking with the, you know, the having the dialogue with the students and with the teachers and other staff members at school. And now all of a sudden we're interacting with family members at home and trying to coordinate times to meet with students and provide those services. It's so different. Different, you know, feedback than we've done before. So that's certainly a school and community engagement also with the family.
Yeah, absolutely. I would be interested to hear about if having a much more direct line to parents has influenced or changed the way that you approach your role as an ed tech. Are you having positive experiences, negative experiences? Have you learned some things that you're going to take with you when we get back into brick and mortar education that could be a silver lining to all of this that we've been going through?
They're all really good questions. We were kind of talking about this on our meeting this morning with our advisor, because it's at times, maybe in hindsight, things could have been looked at differently to help the process, maybe, you know, and that, oh, you know, you're going to be contacted by the ed tech, or, you know, there are times where I'm texting mom saying, hey, I can't get a hold of so-and-so, and might you be able to help, you know, set up that time? So it's been exciting. It's been friendly. It's definitely a lot more people to communicate with. It gives you a different insight into where the kiddo is coming from and what's going on. For me, it's been, I think, really helpful and positive.
Yeah, yeah. I'll share a personal story with you. Is at the very beginning of session one, I shared, you know, sort of my background and where I had come from. And I've been a special ed teacher, and I've been an ed tech, and I've been a regular ed teacher, and I've been an instructional coach, and I've been all these different things. One thing I have a license for that I haven't been is an administrator, because when I got a taste of what I thought administration looked like, I was like, no, I don't think that that's my makeup. But my story is this: I've got a couple of kids upstairs right now. One is a freshman in high school, and one is a sixth grader. And one has an IEP that's math based, and one has an IEP that is reading based. And I consider myself to be pretty up with what my kids need and what they need as learners. But wow, it was like a shovel to the face to try to sit down with both of my kids, who I felt that I knew, and I've always appreciated their teachers and what their teachers do and what their ed techs and support staff do for them. It wasn't until it became almost my sole responsibility to be the conduit between the ed tech and the teacher and the child, to really understand, again, from a different perspective, just all that goes into meeting the needs of these kids, right? And so to take on a teacher / ed tech / support person / all these things and still wear that parent hat was so eye-opening to just how important it is. And I've become such good, I don't want to say friends, but like the relationships that I've built with my kids' individual ed techs. I honestly feel like that ed tech in a way knows my child better than the person that's running their IEP, or knows that person better than even the classroom teacher, because you guys, even in small chunks of time, you get a much more intimate view of that child and that child's needs. And so one of my first careers was as a behavior analyst technician at the Mary Meeting Center for Child Development in Bath. And one of the things that we had, it was a small school, so to implement this on a large scale, I think would be much more difficult. And I would really invite some ideas, if you had them, about how to make a system like this work. And it falls into that school and community engagement piece. But one of the things that we did at that very small setting was we had notebooks that traveled back and forth between home and school, right? And so, and maybe some of you that work in a behavior program or a highly intensive program might have something similar in place. And so that parent would write a note to us about how the child's evening went, and then we would write a note home about how that child's day went. And even though I wasn't, and I was just, and so a behavior analyst technician at that school really was what would be considered an educational technician in a regular setting. There were people above me that were considered the certified teachers, or those that were certified in behavior analysis, those that were certified in education, because I wasn't at the time, and those that are certified in leadership that are creating the programming and then disseminating that to us, and we were the ones that were responsible for making that happen for those kids. But I can tell you that it wasn't the teacher, the administrator, and the behavior analyst that was communicating with the families. It was literally the person that spent a majority of that time in that micro view of those kids that got to spend that time. And so the system that we were able to build around that child, because of that direct connection between the person that knew their child best, was so integral in helping that child to meet those goals and be successful in school. And so by default, through the COVID-19 pandemic, you all have gotten an opportunity to experience that when maybe you hadn't had an opportunity to experience that in the past. And so I'll be interested to see how schools, and I would love to have a discussion with some school leaders about this, about how to better utilize the brain power and the environmental culture and climate power that their ed tech staff has to helping these kids meet these goals. Because this was an indicator of just how vital and important that piece is. But back to feedback. So effective feedback, you are absolutely right, lives within every single one of these building blocks. Without feedback, none of the systems, none of the building blocks can be as solid as it needs to be to build what is considered a true MTSS framework for a school. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to go to a different slide. So bear with me, because this is a multi-slide training that I was using for some other things. But I want to just circle back a little bit to that problem-solving framework and decision rules. We talked a little bit about problem-solving framework in week 2 or session 2. We talked a little bit about decision rules last week in the database collection and data collection. But this is another conversation that's important to bring up also in the feedback discussion, because feedback has to live here and lives as an overlay among this problem-solving process drill down and decision rules, okay? Effective feedback more strongly and consistently raises student achievement than any other teaching behavior that is instituted in a school. I'm gonna say that again. Effective feedback more strongly and consistently raises student achievement than any other teaching behavior. So the ability to give that feedback, the ability to know what kind of feedback is needed, is stronger than any other teaching strategy that's out there.
I
Now,
think it totally makes sense, because I know as an adult, I want that feedback too. I want to know what I'm doing. I think that intrinsically we all want to do the right thing, even our students. But if they don't know what that is, they're not going to be able to be consistent with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to talk a little bit about positive feedback, negative feedback, so we want to talk about positive feedback and negative feedback and critical, what is it that sometimes is called, like constructive criticism, right? Okay, here's the down and dirty. Feedback is feedback, whether it's positive or negative, just like reinforcement. Those of you that know about reinforcement systems, if you negatively reinforce somebody and it increases a behavior, you have still reinforced them, right? So let's say taking away a toy, if that continues to increase a behavior, then you are actually, just because you took something away, you are still reinforcing. And feedback works the same exact way. So if you give somebody negative feedback, right, and that helps to increase a behavior, you are still giving feedback that increases that behavior. And so understanding that feedback, we're going to get into we're going to get kind of into the brainy world of feedback for a couple of minutes here in a few minutes, because what's important is that feedback, honest to true, is not about the person that gives it. It's about how the person receives it, okay? But at its core, what it provides students is just in time, just for me, information that is delivered when and where for the most good, okay? So it's just in time, just for me, and delivered when and where I need it. So those are the important, the important facets of feedback that are kept in mind. It's just at the right moment, just for that one person at that moment in time, and it happens when and where they need it most, okay? And feedback also answers 3 essential questions, okay? So 3 essential questions. What am I learning? How close am I to getting there? And what do I need to do next? So your feedback to students, and I apologize that I don't have a slide for this. So I am going to, if I can get it to work, there we go. I am going to write those 3 things in the chat. So here we go. Number 1, what am I learning? The second thing your feedback needs to address is how close am I to getting there? And the third thing that your feedback needs to address is what do I still need to do? So when you are crafting feedback for a leadership team, or for a student, or for a parent, or for a teacher, or even a peer. And so a fellow ed tech who maybe works with your student in the afternoon, you have them in the morning, and then that person has them in the afternoon, and you want to give some feedback about how the morning went, right? What you want is for your feedback to answer these 3 questions for the most effective punch that feedback is going to offer. What is being learned? How close are they to getting there? And what do they still need to do to get there? What do they still need to apply? What do they still need to do? So if Johnny is learning about, if the thing that they're learning is how to, let's say, produce 3 paragraphs of writing in writing class. Okay, so one of your jobs as their support person is you come in, they're getting a tier 2 intervention. So they get the regular writing with the regular teacher, and then But they're really, one of the things that they're still learning is how to produce writing, right? They just, it's not even about what they're writing at this point. It's the fact that they just won't do it. And so the goal that they have is learning how to produce writing, no matter what it looks like, no matter what it sounds like. It's just getting the writing out on the page. And your job as their ed tech is to come in and you're going to spend an extra 10 minutes with them at the end of class on Tuesdays and Thursdays to help them work through producing writing, right? So you spend time figuring out how you're going to support that child. You work with the teacher. You know what the decision rule is. You know that they're meeting that rule when they can effectively produce 3 paragraphs of writing during the regular education setting, okay? Now, you want to give some feedback to that student about how they're doing towards their goal. They know they have to write 3 paragraphs. They know that you're coming in to help provide strategies and supports that they can use to get there. When you give that feedback to them, you want to filter it through these questions every single time. Because if you just say, wow, look, you've written a lot of work today, or great job, or you're working really hard, that's great for your feel-good endorphins. Yeah, I rock. Look at me, I'm doing great. But it actually doesn't help to feed them towards what they have to do next. And what you want all feedback to do is essentially to feed forward to that next thing. So when you say, awesome job, Johnny, on your writing today, he's looking backwards saying, look at what I did, and that was good, and I feel good about that. But is that feedback going to help him to move forward the next time he has to sit down and produce 3 new paragraphs in that setting? Now, some could argue, yeah, it does, because he's going to remember how good it felt to get the accolade, how good it felt to get the high five, how good it felt to get the praise. And he's going to use that feeling to catapult him into doing it again. Maybe. Yes, if he gets that kind of success enough times that he builds a momentum. But if he's only seeing you every other day, and one day you were out sick, and then another day you got pulled because somebody else was out sick and you had to go work with somebody else, that momentum can't build if it's not done on a consistent basis. So you can't rely on momentum to help kids reach goals in the beginning, because eventually they start to build their own momentum. If any of you have participated in the SEL version of MTSS, we talked about thoughts cause feelings, feelings lead to actions, and then actions lead to results. How a student thinks about a situation is going to control and mitigate how they feel about a situation, and it's how they feel about it that's going to move them to action. It's the action that's going to build the momentum, which is going to get their results. So if you're going straight to the momentum piece, straight to the action piece, and you've skipped the thoughts and the feelings, then you're just going to continue to do the same thing over and over again until that momentum can build up. What these questions that I've dropped in the chat are intended to do is to help mitigate those thoughts and those feelings, right? So this section here, what am I learning? How close am I to getting there? And what do I still need to do to get there? Are strongly rooted in the thought process of what they're being asked to do. And now once those 3 things are delivered, once you've crafted your feedback to meet these 3 needs, then you can interject the high five. Then you can interject the feel good endorphins, because they're gonna know they're gonna be thinking about exactly what they still are, what they've already done. Like, this is how close you are. Look at how close you are. You've written 2 out of your 3 paragraphs. That's amazing work. You only have 5 sentences to go to get to that next part, or you only have this many minutes to go to get to that next part. The more you can increase their thoughts and their feelings, the more action that you're going to get, and then that helps build the momentum. So what am I learning? How close am I to mastering it? And what do I need to do to close the gap? This applies to everybody that you're going to give feedback to. So let's say you're communicating with a teacher. You've come in, it's been 4 weeks, you've done the tier 2 intervention for writing with this student, and it's time to have a discussion about with the classroom teacher so that she can take that information back to the leadership team for the problem solving process. You still want to keep these 3 questions in mind as you craft your feedback to your teacher. Well, this student is learning, how to do this. This is how close they are to getting there. This is what they still need to do, right? So to say, oh, they're doing great, or oh, here's the here's some writing examples, or oh, yep, they're doing fine. Yep, they're doing okay. That's all fine, but it's only part of the puzzle. It's only part of the feedback loop that you need to do. So one thing that you could practice as you're reflecting on this particular webinar, this particular training, is how you can craft your feedback to meet, to make sure that you're filtering it through these questions for the greatest impact. Okay. We are going to try, if I can find it, the whiteboard. And apparently there is no whiteboard on here.
It might be under this share screen setting.
Yeah, I'm in the share screen. Give me just 1 second. Current pages, post attendee, advanced PowerPoint, computer, screen sharing. Yeah, no, it's not there. Oh wait, what's this? Show all windows, Skype. No. Okay, that's okay. We're gonna do this a different way. So bear with me here while I get us to where I wanna go using a different modality. So I'm going to stop screen share. Give me just 1 second, please, because there is something really important that I want to share with you. I just got to get it pulled up. Oh, why? Yes. Okay. My apologies. I had originally thought that I could just do the whiteboard and draw this image for you, but for whatever reason, this Zoom account must not be set up for a whiteboard. So give me just 1 minute. There it is. Okay. Well, did you know that they can hear you? My classroom can hear you. Hi, class. That's my 15-year-old daughter. Okay, I'm going to screen share again. So getting into the idea of feedback thresholds and what those 3 questions are designed to do, go ahead and take a look at this graphic here that I have now shared with you on your screen. So this is a really important visual here that helps us to understand how feedback works in the brain.
Sorry, all we're seeing is your desktop with all
Really?
the
Okay,
No
I can
problem.
fix that. Thank you.
We were just seeing your Google Drive.
Can you see that? Can you see the graph?
Yes.
Yes. Is it, you can see the orange graph?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So here is how using feedback drives learning forward, okay? And so the feedback, there is actually an action threshold that feedback will fall on in terms of whether it is actually going to be utilized and useful for moving student learning, moving student behavior, and getting even our teachers and our administrators to think about how they're going to react to specific feedback. And so your evaluative feedback and your non-evaluative feedback it's gonna take a lot harder for that non-evaluative feedback to hit that action threshold. And that's those high fives, that's those attaboys, that's those, good job today, high five today, and those kinds of things. The more you're able to apply those 3 questions to your feedback and filter your feedback through those 3 questions, it moves you down that evaluative or back up into that left corner of your evaluative feedback. And that's where your action threshold, it's a lot faster to activate that action threshold in terms of whether your feedback is going to be, more beneficial or less beneficial, or more impactful or less impactful. So the sooner that you can activate the action threshold, the better you'll know whether your feedback has actually been successful, okay? And so there's some other stuff on this graph that we're not going to talk about today, but as you can see, the feedback succeeds once it has crossed over that action threshold, and the feedback will fail or not be as effective, or it has to work harder when it's too heavy on the non-evaluators, it's not descriptive, and it doesn't, it's not filtered through a way that the receiver's brain can effectively use it, right? And so one thing that you need to be asking yourself whenever you give feedback to a student, or you give feedback to a teacher of record in your building, is to keep your own data points. Did what I say to that person get the result that I wanted? So having that self-check-in is only going to help improve your own practice as you continue to move forward. So when you give feedback to a peer or to a teacher, make note of it. What did you say to them? How did you say it? And then check. Did it actually work? Did they use your feedback? Did they not use your feedback? Now, you can't control whether they use it. I mean, you could tell a classroom or teacher of record all day long how to best, navigate a particular situation with a student. And if they ignore you, that's on them, right? But it's really hard to ignore something that activates that action threshold. So the more you can craft your message to activate that action threshold, the more you've increased your chances that the person receiving that feedback is going to take action. And that's what you want the feedback to do. You want it to drive that action forward. So one of the ways that you can become a better feedback giver is by taking some of your own reflection and your own data about the feedback that you put out in the world, and does it get the results that you want? And if it's not, you can go back and reassess and readjust the feedback that you're giving based on the characteristics of the feedback that moves things forward, which are those 3 questions that I posted earlier. And so that brings us down to the last thing that I want to cover today. I'm going to stop screen again, just because I got to find the thing that I need. And some of this will get edited out. These are the kinds of things that get edited out, the staring at my face while I stare at my own screen. It just takes a few weeks to get that done. Here we go. Let me know if you can't see this. It's this one. Can you see that perceptual filters visual?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. So when it comes to activating that feedback threshold. You have to understand perceptual filters and how messages are given and received by the listener or by the receiver. And so when you look back again at those 3 characteristics of good feedback that moves people forward, moves them to that action threshold, you have to understand that it gets even more complicated because everybody has their own perceptual filters that they're going to filter information through, right? So as the speaker of the feedback, you have an intended message. And the best thing that you can do is when you're crafting your intended message, understand that your message is going to be crafted through these filters: your values, your beliefs, your presuppositions, whether you're a growth mindset or a fixed mindset, your represented systems, education, culture, class, gender. Whether it's obvious to you or not, you are crafting your messages through these filters. That's just scientifically proven that is happening. Or I don't want to say proven. As a researcher, I don't want to say proven, but that's scientifically significant that when you craft a message as a speaker or a writer, you are inadvertently filtering your message through these perceptual filters. So the best thing that you can do is try and craft your message with the other person's values, beliefs, presuppositions, metacognition, education, culture, class, and gender in mind, right? That becomes really important about how effective your feedback becomes. So you have your characteristics of feedback, which are those 3 things that we talked about earlier. And then you have the perceptual filters of the person that is getting that feedback. What does that person value? What do you know of their beliefs? Do you know this person to be relatively receptive, growth mindset individuals, or have they shown that they have a fixed mindset in certain areas? Education, that plays a role. Obviously, we're in education, so that person's education, whether they're, highly educated or whether they're a kindergartner, you got to keep those things in mind. Their culture, their class, and their gender. If you're a female trying to construct a message for a 10th grade, if you're a white female trying to craft a message for a 10th grade Black student, you better believe that culture, class, and gender are going to play a role in how they perceive your message. Okay, so you kind of have to keep those things in mind when you are communicating these messages, because what happens is whatever you send out, I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but whatever you craft here as your intended message has to go through that person's perceptual filters before they can fully understand it. Every message has 2 meanings, whether you thought that before or not. Meaning 1, what you intended, and meaning 2, what they receive. And so the more that you can rely on the characteristics of the feedback and then anticipate the perceptual filters of that receiver, the closer you're going to get to that feedback activation threshold, and how close you're going to be able to activate that threshold to get them to take your feedback and use it to drive their learning or drive their program or drive their behavior, drive their whatever it is that you're trying to get more of, right? Whatever it is that you're trying to reinforce. That's where we're at. That's a lot of information for one day. I'm sorry. That was another one where it was a lot of things to take in. So both of those charts will be available obviously in the recording. If you saw something there that you think others could benefit from, go ahead and share that with them, or you could pass their name on to me or pass my name on to them. And I would be happy to answer questions or tailor you know, tailor a training for, you know, for someone that you think could benefit from it. If you find yourself having questions that come up as you're watching the recordings or as you're sitting there, you know, later on today reflecting, if you go back through your notes, don't hesitate to email me, and I will answer them as best as I can. I have saved all of the chats, and we'll be going back and through and looking at those. And what I'd like to do is take the chat from all 4 of the sessions and look for trends and themes, and then try to answer those things, and then I will send them out to. One of the hard things is, because I don't take an attendance at each of the sessions, most people are gonna get like a mass email that's gonna say, these are the questions that came up and these are the answers to those questions. And so just because today is our last live session, I am still going to be looking through and trying to analyze all of the stuff that's come in from you guys, and then slowly releasing that back out to you in terms of answers and clarity and those kinds of things. So just have some patience with me. Continue to have patience with me in that area, because I am taking your thoughts and your questions and your feedback very seriously. It's just getting to them in real time is much more difficult. So I appreciate your patience and understanding with that. So just a couple of questions that I can see popping up. One thing about having access to the SEL sessions. Yep. So again, in case you came in late, the SEL sessions, those recordings will be posted at the end of the series. So by the end of next week, you would be able to have access to the SEL ones. And if you're not taking both classes, so if you took this series, but you're not taking the SEL, I do think that there are some topics, MTSS topics, that are covered in the SEL version that are not covered in this, that were covered over there. So it might be worth your time to go through, and especially session 1 of the SEL. If you have not had an opportunity to attend, or when it becomes released next week, session 1 of the SEL has a lot of really good MTSS thought process in there that could, when you listen to it, you'll be like, oh, like that fits in with what Andrea said in the MTSS series. And so that would be one that I would highly recommend. Okay, and I know that there is some talk around the department of offering some summer offerings as well, for not only educators, but ed techs, and trying to put a lens of reentry back onto some trainings that are coming up for this summer. So you'll want to visit that page, that EdTech PD development page. That didn't make any sense, but you'll want to maybe put it on your calendar to go on and check that professional development website for ed techs regularly, because I know that we're being asked to continue to develop some of these things, and then starting to put a lens on reentry and what those sort of things can look like. And I mean, some of this stuff you could almost break out into its own 4-part sessions. You know, feedback could be a 4-part session, data could be a 4-part session. What you got now was sort of just like a gloss over of what's available. So if you have ideas, if you think, oh gosh, it would be really great if we could get a training on this, don't hesitate to reach out and send me a quick email and say, hey, have you ever thought about giving us some training on, you know, fill in the blank. And if I know someone in the department that's an expert in that, I can reach out to them. If I think that that's something that fits within this realm, I can think about it. And I know Laura, I don't know if Laura is still on, but Laura Jones is actually working with Kelly Bailey and I over on the SEL training, and she's helping to do some co-hosting. So if you've got some expertise or some ideas that you think could be beneficial across the state of Maine, you know, we could work on putting something together. And so there really is a lot that can be done that we can collectively use to just help provide the absolute best education for our students that we possibly can, because that's why we're all here, right? No matter what level or what approach we're taking, the reason why we're here is for them and how we are able to help them and shape the minds of tomorrow. Okay, that's all I've got for today. I actually have a 12 o'clock, so I got to run. But thank you for joining and sticking with me, and be looking for those recordings. Again, give me till the end of the week, and Have a great day. Get some sun. It's out there. We need it.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks, Andrea.
Sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank you.